It's quiet long enough.
How many dogs do you have?
2, 3, 4, 6.
Wow.
5 big ones and 1 little ankle biter.
Oh,
John, can you tell us what congregation you're with? And then we can go to Rosemary and then Lisa.
Sure. I'm with the Unitarian Universalists of the Blue Ridge out of Sperryville, Virginia. We're just a small rural congregation right at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Mm. About how many folks are there?
We have on the books right around 60.
So does that mean in terms of actual participation, it's more like 40?
20 to 30 at best.
20 to 30? Okay.
We get about 50% turnout. Yeah.
And that's pretty usual, and it's important.
Yeah.
I know I always keep that front and center because a lot of times, particularly with small congregations, we think of the number we have, but that's not the number we're working with, if that makes sense.
Right.
And that's so important. Yeah. It's so important because we often try to do these things at, 60 people, but it's just not the reality of the situation. And then we wonder why we're struggling so much, or why we're burning out folks because of that concept. And it disproportionately impacts smaller congregations. And when you're in a larger congregation, you still have 20% doing most of the work, but the 20% is larger, a lot larger. And so they just don't get burned out as much, and small congregations try to do a lot of the things that larger congregations do, and sometimes, so I can go on about that, but yeah, that's very true. So the Blue Ridge Mountains, I went to Sweetbriar College, which is near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, nice. Nice. It is a beautiful area.
Rosemary, what congregation are you with? How many folks are there? And then maybe another question I'll ask after we all have a chance to go around is, what's a major challenge going on for your small congregation at the moment? But we'll do that second round.
Yeah. I live out on the east coast of North Carolina in the Outer Banks. We're the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Outer Banks. We have about 40 members, and I would say our average attendance is between 30, is about around 30. And we have like big holidays. We get a good turnout on holidays, but our volunteer group is very small. It's, there's about 8 of us doing everything. And we do a lot. So it gets very challenging in that respect.
Thank you, Rosemary.
And I'm with the San Juan Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which is in Farmington, New Mexico, in the Four Corners, about an hour south of Durango, Colorado. I think we reported 18 to the UUA this past year, and we almost consistently, like every Sunday, are between 15 and 17. And I think some of it is we, have some people who have not joined the fellowship, who attend on a somewhat regular basis. And we have a core group of, I would say, 10 to 12. So yeah, the majority of the fellowship is active in participating and doing things. There are very few people who do. I can't think of anyone who doesn't comes on a regular basis and does nothing but show up. The people who come do things.
That reminds me of, there is a concept in marketing, which I think is relevant to what we're trying to do here, which is how can we increase engagement? How can we increase retention, membership? Because all of that helps us to have more of a solid financial footing. volunteer footing and all of that for sustainability, I think about a marketing concept around hot leads and cold leads. There's like, hot leads, cold leads. And one thing, Liesl, that you mentioned was about you have people who are coming fairly regularly, but they haven't joined. And many times we treat those people the same way we treat any other new visitor. We just say hello and all those kind of things. But our hot leads, those are those who are most likely to join.
Yeah.
And there's different. Mhm.
And I would say that among those who attend regularly but haven't joined, they're active. They're doing things. They just, most often they are uncomfortable with the idea of a church, and joining, is not something that they feel comfortable with. And I think that tends to change over time. But I think that's why our UUA membership is so close to our regular attendance. Because and then I think that's why those numbers are very similar, because everybody doesn't attend every Sunday.
Yeah. So I think that's fascinating. That might be something to talk with your leadership about, like, hey, what is that barrier or hesitation when folks are already, it's like any relationship, because these are relationships.
Yes.
Do you want to make that formal commitment? Or are you going to keep dating? And what kind of conversations can be helpful to take place to go from one kind of relationship to another when you're already doing the stuff, like when people are dating, sometimes they may live together, they're doing all the stuff, but what about that commitment and what conversations might want to take place, or what just being able to talk through. And one way that that can be done is, how many congregations have new member orientations. Have you heard of those before? Like, that's very common, right?
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
And we're so little, it's been a long time since we had like a new UU class or even an orientation. Most of the time it's happening in informal conversations. Then someone decides to sign the book, and they and then they kind of are formally a member. Yeah.
Even in small communities, we can still have our little processes. We could still have, like, even with RE, if there's only 2 children, like, there could still be a RE program. It's just small, and that's beautiful. And there can be, we have these new member orientations, whether it's happens informally or with 1 or 2 people. And what might it look like if we had pre-member orientation? What might that look like? Have you been visiting for a while? You're already a part of the community. Let's commit to be in, something together, like use different language that's not, join our church, join our community, make it official, because we want to lean into you more, like there's a way to have that conversation and give people an avenue to talk about, what's one reason why you haven't joined, or but coming from it from a more of an appreciative inquiry type of perspective, not because the first thing that came out of my mouth was, why haven't you joined? But switch it, turn it on its head. Like, what is it that makes you most excited about potentially joining? That kind of question. Well, what makes me excited about potentially joining is I like this and I like that, and I've been able to get involved in this or that. By the end, they've convinced themselves that it's time to do sign the book. Because signing the book, it does a couple things. One is you get to, increase your number with the UUA on their books. But the other thing is when we make any kind of commitment in a relationship, it really helps to give us all in now, all in. And we need that in our small communities. We need people to be all in, not kind of, a little dab here and a little dab there. So it's beneficial. And then when other people see that, they may say, oh, I think I want to be all in too. especially when they hear what other people are saying about what they're most excited about potentially joining is. They're like, oh, I haven't thought about that, but that is another good reason to sign the book, you know? And even the term sign the book, I wonder if there's not something more warm,
Right.
you know, and less, you know what I mean, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I loved the conversation we had last time about the language, and, you know, keep looking at how, what language we're using, and what feels warmer.
Yeah, the teams versus committees, and
Right.
that conversation.
Faith community. Yeah.
Not church.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe not sign the book, but you know, some other something, you know. Maybe I'll ponder that, because there's so many things, but signing the book just sounds, you know, so transactional.
Exactly.
When what's really happening is relational.
Yep.
But the language isn't matching the action, and so people hesitate to take the action because it's not feeling the way that it should.
Bingo. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And this is also the reason why a pre-membership orientation can be helpful, because it's touching on those feelings, that feelings are what sparks action. You know, people don't just say, oh, will you marry me? No, you have relationships, and then the feelings come, and then you take the action. So, but, you know, there needs to be some sort of catalyst, because just like any relationship, if you just let it keep going on, you know, it will take people longer. But I know for me, one relationship I had, I said, you know, I'm only going to see you twice a week at max, unless if you want to see me more, you'll need to marry me, because I just don't see anybody more than that. You know, like there was some incentive. They're like, oh. And then they thought about it, like, okay, yeah, I want to move forward with this person in a more committed way. So there's just, you know, so anyway, I'll kind of leave it at that. But my intention is to spark these creative ideas about, you know, pulling on, again, the conversation last time about language. And just like there's, you know, marriage counseling, there could be premarital counseling, you know, and how can we give more attention to our warm leads, you know, who are pretty much already there, but what can we do to help them to step over that edge? And then we can focus on those colder leads to get them warm, and then we continue the process. Yeah. All right, John, would you feel comfortable to share, like, what is a challenge facing your community right now?
That's a good question. As far as growth goes, I think that's one of the biggest things that we have, even though we are 60 members on the books. Trying to get a younger generation involved with us is the biggest thing. We live in a very red, very Republican area, and it's just trying to find that younger generation to bring back in. Up until COVID, we did have an RE program, and then all of those kids aged out over COVID time. So I'm probably at 55 the youngest member of the church. So how do we find and continue to grow and bring the younger generation in to join us?
Thank you for that. And then we'll go to, and not that we're answering the questions per se, but just, you know, holding space for these concerns and these challenges. Rosemary?
We did have a similar situation, and I don't know if I should answer the question, but we did face that question. We have the same challenge. We did grow. We lost our whole RE program over COVID. Now we have 10 children. And we found that when a child came, there were no other children there. And so they didn't come back. So we started a family service on the first Sunday of every month and sent out postcards to families saying, this is when all the families will come. And we had a shortened service. We even put a little tiny joys and sorrows table out so they would have they could reach it on their own. And then they had an RE class after, and the parents would meet and get to know one another. We've done that for the last year now. So we're getting steadily about 6 kids on those Sundays. The frustration is we're not seeing them very often on other Sundays. But 3 families have pledged, so that's been a success. But now we're stagnating again. So I just offer that up as a suggestion, because when you're so small, and we had only 2 children, and one child would come one Sunday, the following Sunday, they would have no one to play with. The next Sunday, the other child would come, and this has worked out. So it has been, somewhat of a success. But the challenge now is to get people to be members and to volunteer. Everyone's really loving just coming on Sunday, and they constantly compliment all the services, but we have very few worship associates, and our musicians are getting much older, and it's getting harder to fill these Sundays. So we also close on the 5th Sunday of the month. If there are 5 Sundays in a month, we close on the 5th one. And we do close now for the month of August for summer break. So that's the similar challenge to what John just voiced.
Thank you, Rosemary. And those are some really creative ideas. Really great.
And we have that same issue, but I would name our primary issue as we often function more like a social club than a church. A lot of long-term people who have, very definite ways about how we do things. And, we have come from being a more humanist organization to being more earth-centered. We have a strong CUPS group. I would say about half the congregation is in the CUPS group. But oftentimes, we act more like we act very informal, and like everybody knows everybody, and that isn't always inviting to people when they're coming for the first time.
Thank you for sharing that. Just thinking about some of what you shared in Liesl in particular about things being so close-knit, it can be difficult to bring people in. Just having very deliberate ways to bring people in, knowing that all of us know that we're close. So when there is a new person, like, this is our process, this is what we're going to do. And in a larger congregation, that may be the ushers and the greeters. But in a smaller congregation, a smaller community, there may or may not be a system in place,
Get off mute there. So about 2 years ago, I was on the board, and we wrote out kind of a process. We were using kind of UUA structures of, how do you go about welcoming people? And then that sat on the shelf and nothing happened with it. We just had a board retreat last weekend and kind of revisited that to see if we can get that. And part of what we were thinking is, having a welcoming committee. So it doesn't fall on one person, but have 3 or 4 people who are, usually there to kind of have certain roles. Does that seem like a good plan?
I think so. I would call it a team, the welcoming team.
Welcoming team, welcome team, yeah.
And I would say that it is good to have at least 2 or 3 people, because you never know who may or may not be there that Sunday. So let's say if the committee, if the team is 3, maybe at least 2 might show up on a Sunday. Let's say if not all 3. And then what is their role? Well, they're going to introduce the new people to at least 2 people, and they're going to ask the person a lot about themselves, and they're going to share their appreciation to the person for joining them, and share their appreciation and excitement that they're there, and then try to get some contact information. I think those 4 things that you have a goal for. So the goal is, again, introduce them to at least a couple people. Like, hey, let me show you, let me introduce you. But the first is ask them about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so, what's your name? And da-da-da. Ask them about themselves. And that's number 1, because that would help them to more strategize who they want to introduce them to. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you find out about them and they say, oh, I'm studying over here, or I'm a veterinarian, you might, say, oh, let me introduce you to these couple of people who share interests or who whatever. So it's not, it has the potential to be more deliberate. And there may not be anyone that connects to who they are, and that's okay. But in the chance that there is, that will just help for a stronger connection, if that makes sense. So knowing who they are, asking about them, people like to talk about themselves, number one. And then number two, it's because you're listening to really see, who do I know that might be a good person to talk to for this person, that I can introduce them to. And that they do that for at least two people. So who they are, ask certain questions. And then I would also be careful about the kind of questions you ask based on their age. A lot of times with younger people, they may say, oh, do you have children, or where do you go to school? And some people can feel like, I don't have children. Like, why are you asking me if I have children? Or why are you asking how old I am? If I looked older, you wouldn't ask my age. So just making sure that they are being, cognizant of these nuances, because sometimes an older person may feel very comfortable telling asking a younger person, oh, how old are you? But we wouldn't do that to an older person. And so there is actually a resource that the young YUs have created. It's a graphic document. What do they call it? Infographic. Yeah, thank you. It's an infographic that shows coffee hour conversations for young people. They literally have one. It's so good. What I'll do is I'll post it in the Facebook group. There's a couple things I'm due to post in there that I haven't posted yet. This will be one of the resources I'll post in there. It's really good. So asking them about themselves, making sure that they're just aware of these nuances, and then we said introducing them to people, getting their contact information. And the contact information part, I see a lot of folks not do that because it seems like too much. Can you fill out this card? Take this piece of paper and write your information. It's the same way, like, we don't want to give our emails to people because we don't want to be spam. We're just visiting. So I don't actually recommend using paper cards. Just say, hey, can you share your email address with me? Or, asking for one point of contact, not a whole card with their name and address and phone number and email. That's too much. But just an email address or just a phone number. One of those two is very not intimidating, and it can be warm. But if you ask for, here's a card, and this is the first or second time a person's have come, like, that can be a bit much because they're still deciding. But with an email or a phone number, you can have someone later text them or send them an email, not even inviting them to church, but just saying, it was nice meeting you. Really glad to meet you and would love to see you again sometime. Just thinking about you and hope your week is going well. And that's it. And they themselves will say, that was so nice of them. I think I want to come back. And the thing is, I know we, in terms of gender, and there's a feminine energy and masculine energy and the non-binary energy. And many times we put a masculine energy on getting people to come in because we really need more people and we want to bring in more people. But I have found a more feminine energy kind of way to bring in people can actually be more effective sometimes. And that's an example of not trying to grab too much information at one time, being less intimidating. Pick an email or a phone number to ask, and don't even use a paper. Just say, hey, can I get your, use your phone and get the information. And this is something that your 3 team members would practice, right? Your team. And then just sending an email or a text saying those simple couple sentences, and that's it. And I can promise you that is a lot more than what some other ushers are doing in large congregations. They're not doing that. What they're doing is taking that piece of paper with all that information. If someone actually fills it out, which many don't because it can be a lot, and they may send them something in the mail, or, or what they do send them, the correspondence is more of, come to church, come to service. It's not, it was nice meeting you. mentioning something that you learned about them. It was nice learning that you came because of whatever reason, or that you work in veterinary, remember that thing, that first question when you ask them, mention that in the text message you send or the email. It shows that you really listen. And these are things that set you apart that will get someone to come back, because other people are doing that. And we're small and mighty. So there are these things that we can do in small congregations that the larger ones, they don't have time for. But this is how you grow, right? This is how you grow, one person at a time. Shannon.
Yes, I have a two-part question, but it's all intertwined. One would be, how do you suggest our smaller churches navigate recognizing whether a new individual feels socially comfortable enough to engage and meet two people that Sunday? Because some people would be more introverted and maybe just want to disappear into the congregation. That's number one. And number two would be, as our churches are growing to become more diverse, how do we pump the brakes on overly welcoming marginalized groups to the point that that marginalized individual is overwhelmed with the attention? Yeah.
That's a great question. The very first question that our hospitality team or welcoming team would ask when you ask about the person, after you have that conversation about, oh, can you tell me about yourself? What brings you here today? Or, what kind of work do you do? Or what are some of your hobbies? Would like to get to know you. After you ask that question, you've created some rapport. And then before you get into the second thing of, let me go introduce you to someone, just ask for permission. Hey, it was really neat learning about da-da-da. Would you mind if I introduce you to a couple people? Or would you like me to introduce you to a couple people? They will say yes or they will say no. But it's a lot better than just saying, hey, come on, let me go show you to people. Just ask permission. And even if they're shy, because they were so warm with the first question, they may push through their shyness and come with you. And that's the reason why I say, have that person take them to introduce them to others, because that's actually more comfortable for people than them trying to talk to people by themselves. Does that make sense? You've reached out to them, asked them about themselves. They like talking about themselves a little bit. They're a little more comfortable with you. And now you're going to accompany them to meet other people. They're not alone. You've built a rapport and you've gotten their permission. Whereas what might otherwise happen is you may go up to someone, talk to them, and then they leave. They don't even talk to anyone else because they don't have anyone to talk with them, or they're already feeling nervous. So they leave. But the thing is, remember we were talking about marketing concepts? It takes about, I think, 8 to 20, or I forgot what the number is, touches before someone buys something. We've all heard that. I don't remember what the numbers are now in 2024, but there's a certain amount of touches you need. And every time you meet someone in the community, that's a touch. Consider it a touch. That's why take them to meet at least 2 people. Okay? That's a touch. And then when you email or text them, that's another touch. And then they come back, and then you greet them, and then you introduce them to some other people. Or maybe by then they're comfortable to meet some people on their own, and you get these different touches. And if the person doesn't come back the next week, wait a couple of weeks and maybe text them and say, hey, just checking on you, seeing how you're doing, just friendly, not even inviting them to come to church because they already know you're from the church, right? Just checking in on them as a human being. Because you know what? They may have some friends and family members who are not even doing that. So be that community. You don't have to wait for someone to formally sign the books to treat them as if they were in your community. When you're dating someone, that dating is they're getting to know, oh, if I'm in a committed relationship with them, this is how I'm going to be treated. That's why you say yes when you decide to commit, because you've already shown them, they've already shown you how you would treat them if you commit. So begin to treat them as if they were a member in some ways, but gentle. Checking in with them and things like that. Like, oh, that's really nice. I haven't been there in 3 weeks and they still, sent me a message. But it's how you say it, and not to say too much, not even again. And don't invite them to church. Just say, hey, just checking in. You mentioned this thing. How did that go for you? Or, whatever it was, just on a basic human being level, not inviting them. Because again, you want that kind of feminine energy. You want them by keeping the connection, they already know that you want them to come back because you're being welcoming, but you're not even asking. And you may find that people will do things on their own when you give them the invitation versus when you put a hard ask in front of them. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then the other,
And
oh, go ahead.
This is great because what we did on our board retreat on Saturday is kind of revisit the process. And then we started writing a job description for the welcome team members. And, this fleshes that out in terms of tone and not being overly eager in how we go about this, because particularly with young people, I think we scare them off because we're so oh, you're a young person kind of nonsense.
I know exactly what you mean. And as Shannon was sharing, that happens with our people of color too. It happened to me when I joined my home congregation. Like, it was like a flood came to me of people like, oh, there's a Black person there. Let me go and make sure that they feel welcome. I was like, whoa, I was overwhelmed. There was like a line waiting to talk to me and to welcome me. There was, and I'm not even kidding. It was a line of love, but that was a lot of love for like the first or second time I came in. But
I'm only laughing because I've been there as well, Ebony. That's a lot of high fives.
Yeah, the line is like, so that is the truth. That is what and I knew that they were being welcoming, but it was still a lot. And what helped me is there was an elderly Black woman in the congregation, and she came up to me and kind of shooed everybody away a little bit. Like she did her hand like that, and then she just kind of walked and talked with me. And that connection with her really helped me to feel more comfortable. But she kind of had to tell the others, like, relax, because I think maybe she saw on my face, or she just knew because she was, elderly and in tune with these things. And so I think if I had to tell my home congregation how to do it instead, I would say, but you got to be careful how you say this, but maybe knowing how that can happen, invite your people of color to kind of reach out to the other people of color if they're already there. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that other people can't go. And then the other thing I would say is if you already see like 2 or 3 people coming to someone, like, then they've got it covered. You don't need to wait in that line too. Like, oh, I just want to make sure that someone's talking to them, and you see that there's like a 2 or 3 line over, hovering. They got it. They got it. And next time you can, get the next, person of color who comes in. But if you see a line, like, someone has got it, because really 2 or 3 is enough. So to the first one, just let your people of color just have an honest conversation. If you happen to have people of color in your small congregations, just say, I was at this Chaliceside chat with Sunstone Chapel, and they were saying that some people of color feel overwhelmed when a lot of us come to them. And I just want to name that. And she mentioned that it might be more comfortable if maybe, a person of color, went over there instead of just all of us white folk, or if we see already 2 or 3 people, that we let them handle it. Like, what do you think about that? And your Black folks and your people of color folks will tell you, like, oh, they'll let you know. But it shows you're reaching out, number one, to your people of color. And it shows that you are, you have an awareness, self-awareness about how you may be interacting with other people of color. And so you're showing your anti-racism training, you're showing your awareness, and you're asking, you're making it clear that you would like to explore how to best work on this, because the intention isn't to overwhelm anyone. The intention is to welcome, and you're working on how to best do that, So that's how you kind of come up from it. But again, if you don't happen to have people of color in your community, or you don't quite feel comfortable, you don't have that kind of safe space where you can ask those questions of your people of color, then make sure that everybody knows. If there's already 3 people there, then you don't need to be there as well. Just give the person a smile and a nod, make eye contact, but you don't need to go up there. And what you can also do is, if you already have your welcoming team, right? They would be the ones to go to the new people. And then they would bring them to introduce them to 2 other people who may or may not be you, right? So just stay around just in case the hospitality team comes and you're one of the people that they want to introduce. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think, Shannon, that touches on your question, right? About how to deal with, okay.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, I'm just checking the chat real quick. Oh, coffee hour. Thank you, Lisa. You got that PDF in there. That's good. Yeah, that's exactly it. So please take a look at that document and I'll put that in. Or if one of you all feel free to put it in. Are you each of you in the Facebook group? You're all in the Facebook group? Lisa, are you in it? Or do you have Facebook?
I think I joined, but I haven't seen anything in the
Okay.
group, so I'll
Shannon?
pop back on and look.
Okay, Shannon, if you wouldn't mind, if you could put our thank you Facebook link
I'll
in
go
there.
ahead and check on that for you, Lisa.
And then Shannon has some copy in the chat about what you can do to message someone after you meet them. Yeah, nice template. Yeah. All right, so, and there was a question about, attracting a younger group. And I think, John, you said at 55, you probably the youngest person there. And so, yeah, these are, but one thing that I believe is that when you're deliberate about something, it grows where you put your energy at. So, for example, Rosemary, they were like, we want to bring in more families. And they were very deliberate. They created the space, they were intentional, and it happened. But with a small congregation, you may not be able to put that intentionality into families and this group and that. You got to choose. What is your priority? So, by younger people, you could say, okay, it'll be younger people, or you're going to focus on families. Or if your demographics don't have a lot of families, it can be, you can grow your congregation with adults. It doesn't have to be families. You can grow with adults, but it means that you're going to need to do more reaching out into the community, because the families aren't going to stay and grow. You got to reach out. And in our Chaliceside chat last month, we talked about really creative ways to do different things on Sundays that are not just regular worship services, like actual activities. And those are the things that you can invite the visitors to. Instead of saying, oh, can you come to church? Like, oh, we're having this open mic. Oh, we're having this whatever. That can be less intimidating than come to worship service, right? And so by having those other activities, that can be. Any last comments or questions about that before we kind of shift into, our general topic for the evening?
We used to do fifth Sundays was always potluck. And I think I mentioned this last month when we were there, that why not? 4 Sundays of being something liturgical based on the UUA, because like Liesl, I originally came from a very small congregation of about 12 on a Sunday morning. And so to kind of invite others in, we did like you suggested, doing a community potluck, and did have some luck with people coming in to say hi and get to know us. Even if they didn't stick around, at least it was visibility.
Yeah, and that would
an
be
acknowledgement that we were there.
A great thing to invite people to. I
Yeah.
know when my home congregation, they would have these Friday night family things. They would have pizza and some board games. I brought my kids to that a lot because I didn't have to cook dinner that night. They were occupied and they got to play, and it kind of gave me a break. And then I just got to kind of relax and chat up, catch up on, whatever. And so that was nice. It was, and so, but the congregation was deliberate about creating that thing, and people had to bring food. It was pretty much potluck, but they added pizza because that attracted the kids. Knowing that there would be pizza, kids came for the pizza. My kids would say, when is the church having the pizza thing? They wanted to go to it, you know? So think about, okay, if it's a potluck, what kind of special thing can you have that children may like? And make sure you advertise it so the families know. Because like Rosemary, if you have that certain thing for the families, the once a month, maybe having a potluck that's very clearly also family friendly, like specifically say, you know, there's something for the kids. And then let's say if there's 4 Sundays in a month and one of them is just for the families, maybe another one can be intergenerational. And that could be another way to get families in twice, but they have a little bit of a different experience, you know? And so, you know, there's so much, you know, you can do with that.
When you mentioned food, I wanted to bring up that our board just decided we were going to do a homecoming night where we cook dinner for people in the congregation who haven't come back in a while, that may have left or just, you know, during COVID, some people just never came back after COVID. And some of them still pledge. It's interesting, but they don't come to services. And we thought just to say, we're inviting everybody to a dinner, and because we still think of you, we still consider you friends, we still love you, no commitments, just come in and join us and reconnect for a night. And we're going to see how that goes. That'll be November 2nd, I think. So just an idea we thought to maybe start to get people to come back into the space.
I love that idea. My home congregation, a couple months ago, they had an appreciation worship service where everyone who had served in some volunteer capacity in the past 24 months, it was over a 2-year period, was going to be publicly recognized. And they emailed folks to say, hey, we're going to be recognizing you in service on this date. And so we had more people than I had seen in a long time because they wanted to come and get recognized. And it was really nice. There was a little, you know, snacks and stuff afterwards, an extra, you know, a lot of food during that coffee hour. But having special appreciation things and we each got like a flower and a little handwritten card, you know, and a little something else. It was like a flower and a handwritten card. And one person, they got appreciation for just attending services regularly. And the person is a little bit on the spectrum. You know, so like, for example, they're not an usher, but they always help to put the hymnals back, even though they're not formally on anything. They come every Sunday, sit in like the front row, you know, but they're not formally on anything. But I thought it was so great that they just created something of appreciation for that person, even though they weren't in anything in particular, because they just recognized their presence. And I thought that just really, I still think of it. I was like, wow, you know, we really saw them. You see people, you know. So any kind of recognition, think about those who are on formal committees, but those who are present and benefiting, but there may not be a label, you know, there may not be a label, and that's okay. Helping them to be seen. And when other people see that someone was seen without being on it, just something to mention. One thing I said that I would share tonight is, I'm just looking at my notes here, to mention about member spotlight. So have you heard of this member spotlight thing? Okay, it's kind of like if you have a newsletter, right? You're gonna, let's highlight a member in our newsletter this week, or maybe once a month you mention someone and you reach out to that person and you say, oh, we want to highlight you in our newsletter, give us your picture and tell us, some information about you and your family, and we're going to put your picture in the newsletter. Do any of you have that, or you've heard of that?
We have done it.
You
in
have
our
done it.
newsletter, and it went over great. And when we elect a new board, we put in a photo and a little bio on each board member in our newsletter. And then we did a lot of different volunteers, and it really was interesting. People love learning about each other, and they learn things they never knew. Like maybe, oh, I went to the same university as you went to, or I used to live in that small town, and so it really did help people connect. It's a great idea.
Lisa, were you saying you didn't have that, right?
No, we haven't done that. We did something at a circle supper recently and we do those once a month that are a potluck. And it was what are we going to read about you after you're gone that you'd like for us to know about you now? So it was that same kind of thing, Rosemary, of, learning about the small towns and the things that, and I learned things about people that, I've known for 20 years that I didn't know. And, it was a really fun, way to engage, just a little different than casual everyday conversation.
I love that question. That is a deep and cool question. That's an awesome way to get to know folks. John? Mm-hmm.
No, we've never really done anything like that before. Right now, what we're doing is just in our newsletter trying to focus on one specific team. So we're going to go through our environmental and social justice team and tell what they're doing, so that people that are in our newsletter but not attending the churches, the services, gets a feel for what we're actually doing and what we're about more. But the idea of doing a individual thing is interesting. It's something worth considering. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think I bring this topic up for this month's Chaliceside chat because focusing on the relational and not so much the transactional. The transactional is, what are we doing? This is what we're doing. The relational is, this is who we are, right? This is who we are. And many people come to church for the socializing. We were saying it's a social club, right? And as you get larger, when you grow, you want to move away from it's just a social club to, we're trying to be spiritual here. But the fact of the matter is, the relationships is what keeps people there. And it's particularly important in the very beginning. So I don't have any problem with very small congregations being a little bit of a social club or having to act that way in the beginning, because it's really necessary. It's a part of the growth stage, in my perspective, doing faith-based consulting. It's a part of the stage. And then when you get larger, as you grow, then it's okay, we need to shift a bit now. Our relationships are solid and we're growing. And now it's time to really focus additionally on the spiritual piece. So without the relational, people won't even stay for the spiritual, right? They come to the potlucks, they come for the pizza, they come for the fact that you reached out to them and said, hey, just checking in on how you're doing. Then they come to the fun stuff, and then they start to come to Sunday worship service. Okay? There's some people who all they will do is be in the, let's say if there's covenant groups or small group ministries, there's people who will just attend those and never come to a Sunday service. Okay? I see this a lot at the larger congregation. Someone will say, oh, they don't ever come to service. They're just a member of the men's group. Or it's you see someone doing a men's group worship service and you're like, I've never seen them here before. Who are they? But they've been in the men's group coming, the twice monthly thing online, and you don't see them. They're never in service. So I wouldn't sleep on the social club aspect of it and the relational. It's what keeps people there. They go there first and then they come to worship service if they come to worship service. Shannon. And then John.
Yep, I was just going to say, at my home church in California, there were two things that they did to try to get the congregation to become more community, getting to know one another, not coming in with the starched collars, but more relaxed. One was during a dinner, they did three lies and one truth. One truth and two lies. Thank you. One truth and two lies, right? They had people separate into groups of 2 or 3, and then each person went around. And another thing that they did was human books. And each Sunday there were 1 or 2 people from the congregation that had been there for many years that shared something, a story about themselves that no one knew. And it was very successful in getting to know people before they became a member at that church. Who were they and what did they do in their other life? So yeah, those are just some creative things that I've been part of.
That's awesome. I really like the the human book idea, particularly as an intergenerational service component, because the children will appreciate the story, as will the adults, you know? So that's really great. Thank you. So when thinking about the member spotlight, a lot of times when congregations do use this, they will just say, okay, this is who the person is. Here's a picture of them or their family. They've been a member of the church for this amount of time. This is where they work at. This is their hobby. They're on these committees, and that will be it. And that's pretty interesting. It is a good way to get to know people. But, rather, what might it look like if we say not just who they are, but what the community has done for them? Okay. So when we send the member these questions, okay, can you share with us what committees you're on and how long you've been a UU, or what is your, what faith tradition are you coming from? And then have a question in there about what has it meant to be a member of our community for you? Like, what do you appreciate most about the community? In what way has the community served you? Or what's one incident in particular that the community served you that you're particularly appreciative of? Questions around that, because what happens is that adds a deeper relational layer to that member spotlight, and it lets other people know what, the benefits of being in the community that they may not be aware of, because something could have happened and someone missed that service where the person did a joy and sorrow, and then the person is talking about, well, when I was going through this hard time, the community did this or that, or what I appreciate most about the community is da-da-da. People read it. They not only learn about who the person is, but they learn more about the community itself. Okay? And that is another way that you can create the relational piece. And that relational piece is so important because, again, that's what helps people stay. That's what anchors people in. So I encourage us to think about that. So, not just say the bio of the member, but again, what the community has done for them. Again, from a positive inquiry perspective, what they love about the community, why they stay, what makes coming to your community unique, and add the reasons. Another thing that I've seen is when a congregation does a member spotlight, it's there and then it's gone. It's in the newsletter and then it's gone. What I would encourage you to do, and I think I talked about this last month about leverage, right? Leveraging things by at least 3 ways. If you create a web page on your website where you keep all these member spotlights, and then when you have new people join, it can be one of the things that you can show people. Oh, Rosemary, take care. I see you. Take care. And we are going to end pretty much on time today, too. Thank you. It's recording, so you'll get the recording. So I would encourage you to consider having a space on your website where you list these member spotlights, because it's a really great marketing tool for new members. So if someone goes to your website to learn more about your congregation, and like you can have a button that says new members or perspective, like what is it, a worship service like or whatever. One of your links can be this member spotlight, and people can see, wow, the congregation, it's a really strong community. So there's many ways you can leverage that. Yeah, so I'd say, if you don't have a member spotlight, consider one. And also, it's an excuse to reach out to people, right? It's an excuse to reach out to people and say, hey, we would love to spotlight you in our newsletter. We've been thinking about you, so it's another way to connect, to re-engage current members, because a spotlight is on current members. So if there's one that hasn't attended in a while, this is a way to reach out, and then it can remind them about, oh, why the community is so important and things to them. So we're at 8 o'clock, and I wanted to do better than I did last time. We were like at 8:30 last time, having a good conversation. So I wanted to do better this time. And I think we had a lot of good discussion. You know, there was some really great suggestions from Shannon, and Rosemary shared some really creative things her faith community is doing. And Liesl and John, you talked about what you're doing. And so the goal is that we take this information back to our communities, we share it with our leadership, and take some positive action, and that it keeps us excited about what we're doing, and that you're not alone. You know, we're all working in small congregations, and it's different. The things that work in larger ones don't work always in the smaller ones. And so it's good to have a place where we can be and talk about these things. So Leslie and John, if you can just share maybe a couple words of goodbye before we sign off.
Thank you so much. This is so fun and just nice to be in such a supportive space.
And I agree with Liesl. It's great to have this support here and a chance to learn new techniques, I guess, for lack of better words, in how to help us as smaller congregations continue to survive and thrive in these trying times that we have today. Thank you, Ebony, for hosting these.
Absolutely. Shout out to Shannon. She's been helping me, and it's great not to be alone in this whole, setting these things up. So thank you, Shannon. And all right, Leslie, Liesl, and John, I'll see you hopefully next month as well. So take care. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.